Alright, okay, good evening everyone. Welcome to today's stream over here. We'll just give a couple of more seconds for people to start joining in. Right, so as usual, what we'll be doing over here is to walk through the markets, share some of the opportunities available, the analysis and the outlook for the week itself. And we'll see if you guys have any questions. Feel free to put it into the chat. And then from there on, we'll be looking at the questions and, of course, answering them accordingly. Okay. So I'll start off with the dollar index. Dollar index over here since last week to this week, to be very honest, not much of a change. The main development, of course, is that it has been in consolidation for the past 2 weeks, and as of end of last week, we did have the market coming back up to the 618 retracement. So of course, for now, the primary focus or the directional bias here that I'm looking at is going to be bearish. Okay. So far, we do see some reaction of the 618. Ideally, what we want to see over here is for price to start moving lower. Okay, breaking impulsively some of this minor low here. Especially on the lower time frame, we'll probably get some detail. Then that will kind of give us the confirmation that the pullback towards the 618 may have been completed, and we are expecting some sort of a 1-2 trade. Right? And of course, as long as the high here at 108 holds, we're gonna be more towards bearish bias. Primarily also because if you look at again back on the higher time frame, right, on the daily point of view, we still have this channel here. The price is still respecting that as of now. And of course, from a daily perspective, we get an impulse correction and we're still expecting downside. Okay, and of course, if you kind of combine it with the fundamental point of view, the Fed is still generally in the bearish stance, right? We're still looking at rate cuts overall, right? So that's the current view on the dollar index. Obviously, we don't just trade the dollar index directly, right? But that gives us an overarching perspective on the dollar. And of course, that would also have some impact in terms of like the asset classes that we're trading, okay? Euro dollar then would naturally be the inverse side of things, right? So last week development has been slow, very much in the corrective phase, right? In the consolidation phase as well. So of course we did came down towards the 50 and 618. Price currently is kind of respecting this zone here as well. But the confirmation, kind of like similar to the dollar. We want to see price actually taking out some of this internal highs with momentum, and then that will kind of conclude that alright, this pullback may have been completed. And then of course from a wave theory perspective, this can simply be an expanding flat, right? Okay. And then we'll be expecting a 1-2 3, right? So very, very simple structure as of now. Okay, so this one here, to be very honest, I don't think we'll get a setup for the week. Okay, because if I bring you to the lower time frame, we want to see some sort of a confirmation where price actually take out some of this high here with a momentum candle, which means we want to see price actually close above this high, and then we'll wait for the pullback, right? So that basically require the price to do a couple of things, and by the time it completes, probably going to be end of the year, or say end of the week. So I don't think this is a setup that may actually occur within this week itself. Okay, so this one here probably not something you want to pay too close attention. Just put it on the sidelines for now, but once we get that clear break, we'll be focusing back on the euro dollar. Okay, GBP USD is the one that I would say perhaps within this week we may get something interesting. Okay, so pound dollar here, last week we did came back, quite sharply towards the 618. But last week we kind of covered so that versus the euro dollar, the pound dollar had a clean break, right? And of course that would give us a high conviction that this would develop into a three-wave WXY to the upside. Okay, after a pretty long extended move to the downside, right? We're just looking at a simple 1, 2, 3 over here. So for our perspective, we did get that very nice and decent bounce off the 618. Okay, so right now if you go down to the lower time frame on the pound dollar, we did get that clean break of structure as well. Lower point here, we do get a little bit of a liquidity sweep. So the setup overall is building, but I did not put in a pending order as of today yet because price is still basically very near the top, right? So ideally, we want to see price coming down correctively in nature as well. Maybe forming a minor low here tomorrow, right? If you can find a minor low tomorrow on Wednesday, and then Thursday morning will be great to be setting a pending order, because then this low here would then be serving as a potential liquidity grab. Then that's our pending order. Potentially this would play out nicely like this. Okay. So this one is something I'm focusing on, depending of course how price is going to develop for the remaining of this week going into tomorrow as well. Again, we don't want this to come back down sharply, right? Because if this comes down fast, then that's not really an ideal setup. Yeah, so this is where the key 618 is. We get a decent bounce. If we can get a corrective pullback, we'll be looking for the trade. Of course, on the smaller time frame here, we're just looking at targeting this high, right? So if I bring it back to the 4 hour, we're basically looking at the perspective of this pulling back and then trading this up here like that. Can we, of course, extend this all the way up towards like 1.2930? Obviously, right? So again, that's up to individual, how you guys would love to manage your trade. Sort of, right? Because the simplest foundation of this is basically a 1:2 risk to reward ratio. Alright, if you kind of take this here, it's just simply 1:2. If you're gonna take that to like 1.2930, right? Then obviously the risk reward is like 8 point something, right? You obviously would then manage to trade accordingly and then throw your stops and etc. Right? But that's the foundation of the setup itself. Okay, so pound dollar is something I'll be keeping close watch. Something that you can look into as well. Aussie dollar overall still neutral. I think this one would take a little bit more time. Again, developments like that usually is just gonna be slow. I'm gonna be neutral and just leave this aside. I don't think there's really anything that is worth, really paying too much attention to, right? Price can really come back into this territory. Again, I'm not too keen in like spending too much time really monitoring the Aussie dollar for now, because the current development of price structure is just messy. Alright, so this one here, we'll just leave it. Dollar Canadian still extending higher. Again, remaining patient on this. But of course, from a low point perspective, the 1.42 would be crucial if price made a break below this. That would be an early indication of maybe a pullback starting, and of course, this is definitely very, very overextended. Okay, I'm not too keen in buying up in terms of where we are, but of course, if you look at it from a higher time frame perspective, this is essentially where the price can potentially still go higher, right? We can't clear off all this resistance here, so the next resistance is really at this peak. But having said that, I'm just not comfortable looking to buy at this price point, right? Unless price gives us a decent corrective pullback, then that would be a total different story. But for now, pretty similar to Aussie dollar, or just leave this aside. The yen pair, so dollar yen is currently still testing a 618. There isn't much of a clear reaction as of now, so price is basically stalling there. So I'm just gonna be patient on this as well, right? So nothing much, to be very honest. Whether to be buying this and expecting this to go up, or selling this, we'll need more information on the development moving forward. Okay, so this one here, I'm just gonna leave it aside. Couple of these pairs, I think that's really nothing much. Okay. Gold here is gonna be short-term bearish, right? We did take out that high, kind of a little bit of a fake break in the market, make it pretty impulsive move back down. taking out that minor low here as well. So that is that confirmation of this being the top, and potentially we'll see the move down to retest the bottom, right? So what can develop into is maybe a regular flat over here, right? So impulse 1, 2, 3, and then one more push up. So that's the short-term perspective where we can get a pullback, we can get a sell. Okay, but I think this earliest setup, because price is still moving, right? So there's always that readjustment of the fit. I would say the earliest potential setup that we may get is likely gonna be maybe closer towards like Thursday or even maybe early next week, and we're gonna go into that Christmas New Year season, you know, and the thing is whether you want to trade it or not. That would be another thing, right? But that's the view on gold. I would say this week so far I'm not really monitoring and having it in my watch list, yes, because this pullback is gonna take time, right? From a forward scale, it's gonna take time, and as I mentioned, by the time this would develop and hit the key area around this zone, it's probably gonna be end of the week, right? So nothing too urgent right now. Okay, now can we look at a counter trend, like really short-term buy towards the as a part of a retracement? We may, okay, because on the lower scale, right, what can happen over here is this can potentially turn into a liquidity sweep if price comes back up. Okay, and if it can take out some of this highs here, okay, and then give us some sort of a pullback, this can be a short-term buy, okay, as part of the retracement trade, okay. But I think today is just too early to say, right, because we are still at the bottom. Okay? The thing here is there are a couple of conditions that price needs to really fulfill before we can get that short-term buy trade. So tomorrow, if we can see this push up, you know, taking some of this high here, we still need to wait for that pullback, okay. And by then again, you know, probably end of the week, then we can take this up. You know, maybe by Friday or Monday, if it's up here, then we'll start to look for sell, right? So you can take the short-term buy, and then after that, the sell. So yeah, we'll see how things develop from here for gold. But that's the forecast, that's the trade plan moving forward if you get it. Okay. Silver really neutral right now. Price doesn't seem to be really reacting off that 618. More of like stalling over there. So from a higher time frame perspective, to be honest, it's not the cleanest structure that is developing at the moment. Yeah, so for that reason, I'm just gonna stay neutral, and price may, whoops. Okay, price may just come back down here and kind of test this bottom. But for now, there's really no clear pattern, so I'm just leaving this aside for now. Okay. Then we have crude oil. Crude oil here, I'm bullish bias overall. Okay. The perspective of this is basically we have this lows here. Okay. The market made an impulsive move, breaking some of these highs. So right now, if you can get that pullback, you know, at least correctively, then this zone around the 68.75, 69.25 would be a key area to look for a potential buy trade. Okay. Now, if you go down to the lower time frame, we don't really have a buy setup, obviously, because we want to wait for price to come down here. Would we be looking at a potential sell as a pullback short-term trade? Possible, right? I mean, as of now, we do have this minor little break there. We can't really say that this is a liquidity sweep as of now, unless price can take out this low. Okay. But by the time price takes out this low, which is around 69.25, right? We're basically at this low. Okay. So for that reason, I don't think this would be a high probability retracement trade based on those factors, right? Instead, what I'll be looking out for is if this just keeps coming down, we'll wait for some sort of a setup to buy, okay? like this, right? The setup to buy at the key area instead of like looking to sell this. Okay, yeah, so that's my take on crude oil, right? So this week probably the retracement is going to continue. Maybe going to next week is where we can look to buy. S&P over here, the expectation is for price to continue to pull back. Okay, I don't see any setup in the short term, in the smaller time frame. At least for the S&P, right? So if you go over to the index market, Nasdaq is pushing up, Dow Jones is coming down. There's a little bit of a divergence within the US market itself, right? S&P is sideways, Nasdaq is going up, Dow Jones is coming down. So three of this, to be very honest, is not a clean and clear opportunity that we can look into trading. I would say this one right now is kind of like at the 618, right? So we'll give it maybe a couple of days to see how that's going to react. Nasdaq is definitely still bullish, right? And the S&P is basically in the consolidation. Like among the three, I would say the clearest structure that we can identify right now is obviously the S&P, but there's really no near-term opportunity as of now, right? So US market, I would just put it aside. This is potentially consolidating, right? So again, would need some time on the German DAX. Probably just leave it aside. FTSE, it's interesting. If I can extend this a little bit, that would be a potential three-wave move. Right, so there's a little bit more downside here. Okay, so yeah, I mean, if price comes into this territory, we'll be looking at potential buying, right? So UK FTSE, keep an eye on around 8,000, maybe 8,002. On the lower time frame, we can get some sort of a setup. Okay, then that's obviously the buy trade setup around that key area. It requires time, right? So I don't think this is something happening within the week. China, Hong Kong, nothing there. The next will be Aussie. I think Aussie potentially have something, right? On the 4-hour time frame, we see a very nice little reaction of the 618. If I were to bring you to the lower time frame, okay, we have that setup building in, right? So we have the market taking out the liquidity over here, reversing, break of structure, even this high here. So this one here, every condition is there. This is where the 618 area is on the high time frame. So if you can get some sort of a push lower, pull back, okay, and then starting to see something like this, we can place a pending limit. Okay, and then this would serve as the liquidity, push down entry, look for the buy. Okay. Now again, this is something where do you want to just target this swing high, or do you want to then look at a higher time frame and potentially put your targets all the way back up here? Entirely up to you, right? Because on the lower time frame, we are just simply looking at something like this. Okay, I mean your risk reward is about 1:2. If you put here, if you put here, if you put here, anything above that, okay, generally is going to be a very healthy risk to reward. So the technique on doing that, obviously, you can take partial, manage your trade, right, by trailing stops and then having multiple partial targets along the way. Okay, so among the index, to be very honest, Aussie is looking very clean. Okay, Aussie 200 is looking very, very clean. So I would say in terms of time expectation, I mean the market is now closed in Australia, right? But what you can look out for is tomorrow morning, if you can get a little bit of a dip. On Wednesday, some sort of a start pullback. Thursday here, and then Friday, maybe you can put in your pending order. Right? So whether is it going to be a Friday trade or a Thursday trade really depends on how the price is going to develop. But it's more of an end of the week setup, okay, on this particular index. Cool. So those are the indices, and then moving into the pound yen. This one here, nothing there. Okay, I'm just gonna leave it aside. This is basically V-shaped junk. Okay. Aussie yen is something interesting to be keeping watch. With it came back to the key area, right? I mean, not came back, but we kind of tested that key level, right? So that's actually a three wave development. Of course, potentially that can be a wave 4, right? So if I stretch out a little bit, you can see what we're looking at is 1, 2, 3, 4, and then maybe fifth wave, right? So we're looking at that development of fifth wave. Very nice little reaction of the 100% 1:1 extension, right? So obviously bearish. And if you go down to the lower time frame, okay, we do have again, if I just clean this and make it simpler, that's basically your liquidity sweep. We have that break of structure just happened as of today, okay. So ideally what we want to see obviously is this come down a little bit more, and then tomorrow starts to do a little bit of pullback from a little high, and then come back down, and then Friday is the trade to go, right? So this one again, something I'm keeping watch, right? Basically those that I've tagged, they're essentially trades potential that I think is worth noting. Alright, yeah, so pretty clean, pretty straightforward. We'll see how things go, right? Same thing here if the setup comes in, whether you just want to aim for this low, right, for 1:2, or you want to go for extended targets, entirely up to you. Okay. Pound Australia, initially I was looking at the key areas, right, but of course, based on the current reaction that we are seeing, not really ideal, right? Because I mean, price can still easily bounce back, but as of now, it's not the cleanest setup at the moment, right? If I bring you to the lower time frames, yeah, I mean, we can still, as I mentioned, we can still get the rejection, but the conviction for me to sell it because of this impulsive pullback is not very high anymore. Okay, because the initial expectation we have is that the market come back correctively, and then we'll be looking at this coming down, right, as a 1, 2, 3. But again, the impulsive pullback kind of like reduce that conviction on a particular trade as of now. Okay, yeah. So this one I'll probably just have it here and see how things roll. Okay. Bitcoin, potentially this is slowing down quite a bit already, so I don't see a buy instantly now. Okay, I mean, even if you want to buy, you probably want to wait for a pullback and buy, right? I'm not a fan into selling the Bitcoin. Okay, even if let's say you're looking at it from a retracement point of view, I don't think it's worth taking that sell. Again, it's just a little bit too volatile, and what can it do is it can comes back down, and then this can continue to do something like this, right? So yeah, BTC here, I'm not touching it at the moment. I think you probably just need to be very, very patient. If you miss that train, that's it, right? Don't try and chase it, right? Yeah, so that's my take on some of this major instruments that I'm looking at, right? Okay, so the primary one, just to kind of summarize before we look at some of the questions you guys have, will be this three, right? Index wise is Aussie 200. I think that's very, very clear. Then currency wise, we have the pound dollar as well as the Aussie yen. Cool. Okay. Question here. See any idea on Euro Canadian? Okay, H4 time frame. Let's take a look at that. Okay, I think I mean, in terms of like wave expectation, it seems to be having still some room to go higher, right? Okay, that would then bring it towards like where these areas are. To be very frank, this is something, if I don't have any of it, probably not something I'll pay too much attention to. But right now the expectation is probably going to be more of like expecting this to complete the WXY structure over there, right? In the near term, this can be seen as an internal here as well. Okay. Yeah, so I think overall, if you're gonna pick a direction, probably gonna be gonna be bullish bias. But it's not something that we will have any sort of a setup, right? I mean, if you're looking at a sell, yeah, you may need to manage that trade accordingly, depending on how price is gonna develop from here on. You know, what's your lot size and things like that. What's your margin available and things like this too, right? Yeah, so I can't really advise you on that trade. But the direction and the analysis over here is there's a good chance this can continue higher, potentially towards like 1.51. Okay, which is also a very strong psychological number, right? It's an even number itself. Okay. Of course, 1.5 is also a very strong psychological number. Yeah, so all even numbers are usually the strong psychological numbers. Okay. JPC JPY. That's a very interesting one. Okay, that's nothing on JPC JPY. Maybe you have a typo. CHF, Swiss yen, right? Swiss yen over here. Yeah. Okay, we do seem to have a little bit of reaction there. Okay. But on the overall view, yeah, I mean, what we can squeeze in is this can potentially be, you know, a leading diagonal 5-wave structure. Okay, if that's going to be the case, then that would be wave 3, then this can be wave 4, and then, you know, we can expect the move down, right? Okay, and of course, then the invalidation of it would be here, right? Because then wave 4 cannot come into territory of wave 1, right? And of course, this one looks overlapping. That's why the part here I'm potentially suggesting is this can be a leading diagonal, right? And then wave 2, wave 3. I mean, this one we have very clean 1, 2, potentially 3, 4, 5, and then yeah, the pullback, right? So that can be a valid count on the Swiss yen. Okay, but of course, wave 4 pullback usually is not as deep, but this is a little bit deep. So I think the primary direction here is likely going to be expecting downside. Okay, and of course, if this one you go down to the lower time frame, yeah, I mean, we can see this as some sort of a liquidity structure that has been taken out, right? The main confirmation that this pullback may have completed, to be honest, is this low, right? So you probably want to wait for price to take out that low, to give you that confirmation that perhaps the pullback is completed, right? So you can see this low here. Okay, this low here. So if you can take out that low, then this might conclude wave 4, and then we can start to look for downside. Okay, so this may be quite similar to the Aussie yen. Okay, at the end of the day, they are basically the yen family, right? So they tend to move in tandem anyway. Okay. Oh, Japan 225, the Nikkei, right? Oh, surprisingly, I don't have the Nikkei here in my global index. Just add that in. Yeah, probably put this in. Okay, just slot it in. Let's see. Okay, this structure doesn't look very clean. Okay, it's doing this, right? Which is, from wave theory, is not the easiest structure to decipher. Because it can be a very, very complex correction. It can be a simple triangle. It can be, you know, a double zigzag and things like that. So Right now, this is basically the consolidation. There's a little bit of a contracting, which gives the feel of a triangle. So if that's gonna be the case, then obviously you can expect this to pull back and then from there bounce up, right? So that's the primary take. The other way to look at this can be a double tree or double zigzag. So if that's going to be a double zigzag, right, then we'll be expecting more of like something like this. Okay, where we have this as a 1, 2, this as a 1 and then this as a 1, 2, 3. Okay, there's a slight break of that as well, and then this will come back down, right? So WXY. Yeah, so I think right now the take here is you probably wouldn't want to be looking at a buy here anyway. You'll be expecting more of a pushback down, so that would maybe give us a little bit more clue, or even just maybe a sideways move like that, right? And then this would be the buy area to look out for. Right now there might be an opportunity to maybe take a short-term pullback sell, right? Yeah, so that's on the daily scale, right? And then on the 4-hour, we do see a little bit of a structure like that, which is a little bit of a lack of momentum to the upside as well, right? So on the 4-hour, if you carry on that bias on the daily down, right, this will be your invalidation swing high. Okay. From a 4-hour time frame perspective, I would say if you're looking at 4-hour, right, that will be your confirmation low that price would need to take out to suggest that this top is there. Okay. So on the lower time frame, we'll carry the bias of being bearish. Okay, we'll carry the bias of being bearish. Going into since the daily build up all the way down, right? We'll be building on the bearish view. On the hourly here, what I see is a very clean sweep of that move down, right? So I would say if we can get some sort of this would then establish as a swing high. Right now, this will establish as a current swing low. If you can get some sort of a pullback like this and then, correctively developing, you can incorporate, some sort of fib here. Okay, that will give you that sell. Okay, and then what you're expecting is simply a impulse 1, 2, 3, right? And then this one here, we're looking at that move down as well. Okay, so that will be my take on the Nikkei, right? From the daily point of view down, right? So building that bias here on the daily point of view, because the 4-hour can't really give us a clear bias, right? Because of this huge consolidation. Yeah, it's not a clear bias, right? So that's why we need to go to the daily to build it down. All right. Yeah, so that's on the Nikkei. Good. Anything else? All good. Okay, I see a question here. Dollar yen daily chart is forming engulfing. Yeah, if you're looking at the dollar yen, right? For it to be okay, this is not really engulfing, this is an inside bar as of now. Okay, on the daily, right? If I zoom in really clear. This would be more or less considered as an inside bar, right? Because this is the previous day high, this is the previous day low. Today, the market is basically trading within the previous day range, right? So this is considered more of an inside bar. Usually, this means that, on the lower time frame is consolidating. Okay, and usually inside bar can indicate that potentially it's going to be breaking out, right? I mean, that makes sense, right? At some point in time, the price would just break, okay? What's an engulfing? Engulfing doesn't really look like that. If I were to show you an example of an engulfing, right? we have a clearer. I mean, this is a clear example. Okay, you can see this candle, and then the next day, right, the entire body kind of like, or even the high and the low actually like covers up the entire spec of the previous day, right? So that's an engulfing. Okay, this is an engulfing candle. The one that we're currently seeing on the daily is actually more of an inside bar building up. Okay. Yeah, but the day hasn't closed yet, right? We haven't ended the day yet. So usually, if you're looking at daily, you want to wait for the daily close for the confirmation of the pattern itself. Okay. Yeah. So hopefully that's clear. Good. Okay. Yeah. So if there's no other questions I'm seeing over here, generally that's all for today. Hopefully it's kind of clear, give you some idea of what to focus on. Okay, for the week. Yeah. So that's all from me for today. All the best for the remaining part of the week itself, and we'll see you guys in the next live session. Just a quick one. Next week we'll not be doing any session because again it's the Christmas session. Okay. Yeah. So just heads up. Okay. So all the best, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Okay. See you guys. Bye bye.